Welcome, and I'm going to be talking about bending, and we'll have a little Q&A and such. How many here has never bent? Oh, you never bent? Okay, good.
I thought you were asking who had bent.
Oh, okay. Sorry. All righty. Who here has a lot of cracking problems or springback problems?
Springback.
Okay, springback. All right, we're going to cover that. Who here has bending machines? Who goes by hand?
Bending machine.
Bending machine?
Yeah,
Both. Okay. Those that learn to bend by hand have a little advantage because they kind of learn a little bit more about the physical properties of wood. I don't know, anybody here know Jimmy Edmonds from Virginia? He's a well-known builder. Bob Gleason? Yeah. Okay, Bob Gleason. So I'm going to share a couple of tidbits that I have learned through the years. The bending machine is that kind of takes a lot of the skill out of it, but you probably run across warpage, sinking, and such. So I will tell you that a lot of your bending success or failure can be wood selection. One thing that I have been experimenting with the last year, thanks to Bob Gleason, here everybody knows what Windex with ammonia D is. I've been using that instead of water.
Really?
Yes. In the old days, they used to use ammonia when they used to make wooden farm implements. And the ammonia is actually a cell softener. Now, I do also use, on occasion, Super Soft 2. And for people who bend on an iron, you probably have a higher cracking rate. Do you bend by hand or?
Hand.
Okay, by hand. Do you have a homemade rig or what?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you use for heating source?
Propane torch.
Okay, you have a hard time controlling the heat with that, but it will work. Also get a steam iron. Okay? Wood, when you're trying to bend it, in a bending machine, that's more pressing it into shape than when you're bending. And when you're bending, do you use a slat over the top or some sort? Okay, that can be tricky. So you kind of learn a feel of when it starts to get soft. I've learned that if you take a steam iron, put that puppy on steam with the iron, you're heating both sides of the wood, and the steam actually will help the wood to start softening. And then once it starts going soft, set the iron down. Don't answer the phone with it, just set it down. And then get it into shape, dry it off, and be very cognizant that you can scorch. So you want to be very, very careful of the heat. So that's something you want to be very, very aware of. For those of you that have bending machines, because bending, binding, and purfling on a hand bender is pretty tough. You can actually do that under hot water and tape it to your guitar overnight, and then it will take a shape. But when you're doing purfling, who here likes to do 45 style? Nobody likes to do 45? Okay, who uses wood purflings? Okay. How many of you have trouble getting wood purflings on the side that they lay nice and don't twist? There you go.
So they're actually a hard stuff.
Yeah. Here's something that's going to be a big help to you. Where do you get your wood purflings? Steel bags? Or?
Yeah.
You just heard a thump on the sound system. Well, by the way, thank you to Glenn. He's doing recording. Mike Went, Jimmy Hall, Doug Moore, and Doug Moore, and Dave Meyer. They've been doing a video, so we all want to see them say thank you. You lay it out.
Thank Bill, too.
And Bill, yeah, Bill's doing photos. I'm sorry. Hey, thank you for alerting me to that.
You didn't know I was here.
Okay, are you using multi or single purflings, or both? Okay, what you want to do is make a pair, set them up, and tape them up into a nice neat stack. Get a set of binding that you can squish it together. Because when you put it in a bender, as it goes through this shape, it doesn't want to stay flat, it'll just roll flat on you. The binding being held against there helps to hold that straight. Now, what will happen when you take it out of the bender, this stuff will probably warp and twist a little bit. That doesn't matter. That will come out really nice and neat for you. Okay? Who has questions about bending temperatures? All right. First off, what I bend my wood, if we're talking ukuleles, at .065. If I'm talking guitar sides, I like to go somewhere between .070 and .80. I know a lot of people, and I think I even may have recommended that in previous videos about .095, but I'm finding that .70 to .80 works very, very well.
What was the use, John?
That's 075.
65.
Yeah,
65 is for you.
basically a 16th for ukes, yes, and .075 thousandths of an inch for guitar sides. All right, and if I talk too fast, don't be afraid to tell me to slow down. Okay. Do you use like a bending, like a little bending shape so that you know when you're bending your wood, they're pre-bent to the shape that you want?
I bend them around the guitar form,
Okay.
and I use the same form that I bend the sides with.
Yeah, okay. All right. Now, when you get to bending your sides itself, do you pre-shape your sides before you bend them?
No.
That really saves you a lot of work.
Oh.
It saves you a lot of work. Now, if you don't want to buy a pattern, it's real simple. Lay a piece of tape on a side, and at every inch, measure back to front. Back. And that'll give you, like, I'm going to make up numbers, but like 4 7/8. Now we're going to come down to 4 6/8, and so on and so forth, so that it will actually show you the curve of the guitar in its shape. So that when you put that into the bender, you will have a lot less work driving the bus and shaping the sides for the back radiuses.
Just gotta put it in the right way.
Yeah, well, the other thing, yeah,
Is
that's,
the top flat?
I do the top flat. Yeah, the top I run that through the joiner, and then I only really shape the back. But as he just pointed out, I always lay my pear down. I get those white pencils from Michael's. That way I can lay it down and I run the pencil across at the tail end. When you put it in the bender, make sure that's up so you won't bend two of the same sides. But if you do, get the steam iron out, steam bend it, put it in upside down, and you'll get the other side back. And you can do it. I do that on the bender a few times a year when I'm enjoying a little bit of Pottsville's finest. Okay. I always leave about 1.5 inches on each end for trimming. Okay, that I do like to do. So what I would like to do here, since you guys probably have more questions than I know what you want, let's do a good Q&A. So who wants to ask? Yes, sir.
Go back to the ammonia.
Yes.
You spray the ammonia on the same way you would spray the wood on before you bend?
Yes, I do.
And does it have any coloration effect like on maple or?
Windex with ammonia D doesn't affect it one bit. Super Soft 2 will give you a discoloration, but it just comes off very quickly with the light sanding. It's not a permanent marker. I generally use slat, wet paper, wood, wet paper, slat, heating blanket on the top. And I generally hang a little piece of weight on the tail end of the slat, and when it hits the floor, I know it's ready to bend. I always make sure on the upper bout, before I go to bend it, pick it up, make sure that it's stamped. Okay?
Do you use the paper for every wood or just for maple?
I use it for just about everything, especially those of you, I can't get near cocobola because I'm allergic to it, and there's a lot of resin that comes out, and the paper will absorb the resin and not place it on your slat.
So do you spray the paper with the Windex? Or?
I do.
Oh yeah. So
Actually, what I do is I lay the slat down and I'll spray that with Windex because the paper will stick to that and it won't go slipping all over.
Oh, yeah.
Then I do spray my sides, lay that on top, do the top, same thing, and then the slat. For those of you to help, put a little on your bending machine. On the left side 1, right side 2, and then your first time you bend it, flat side on 1, second time flat side on 2. You will make sure that you do get a pair and not 2 base sides. Okay.
So I typically make my sides a wedge shape. You're saying, I think, go ahead and just cut the
Yeah.
whole pattern.
Okay, let me get to the chalkboard, and I'll show you kind of what it looks like.
How much do you allow as an allowance for sanding off for the rim? Or
What I do, my rule of thumb is, okay, in the case of a dreadnought, it's going to be 4 7/8 at the tail, 3 3/4 at the neck. Until I'm done driving the bus and truing the top, I generally fall into that area when I put my top and back on. Basically what I put off is going to come back with the top and the back. So let's say you have a guitar that you measure. So to make your own pattern, That's kind of over exaggerated. As you go put your piece of tape on your guitar and you measure it every inch, you know, just take this measurement there, that measurement to there, draw the lines, cut it off, and that will just save you a lot of work in driving the bus and doing it when you get it into the mold. That is the big thing. And you can get that from any guitar, any shape, but one note, who does cutaways? Okay, on cutaways on the back, because your guitar is doing the swirl, you end up with you need to put this little hump in here. And I generally do somewhere about in the middle, a 3/8 inch nice little ride, so that when you drive the bus, you create that higher spot that would be inside of the curvature. All right? Make sense? All right? Good.
At what point does that break off,
What, the...
your shaping?
Okay, somewhere about 12 inches in here, you're going to come up 3-4 inches, and it's just going to slowly come down. Triple O's will be a little bit different than dreads, but I just have two patterns. One pretty much takes care of things that I do in 15-foot radius, and the other that I do in 20-foot radius. Any questions on that?
Your lines, you know, like I've done a similar thing for guitar, do the lines and measure it out. But I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. So you say, you know, draw out the 1-inch lines to get your pattern from the guitar.
Right. Yep.
On the guitar, you haven't made
Yeah.
it.
Well, no. You have a guitar. Put a piece of tape at the center line up to the neck. Put 1-inch marks on your piece of tape.
Yeah.
And then just measure straight up from the back to the top as you go along, or from the top down to the back as you go along. So put the tape on the top, and that will plot you out a reasonable facsimile of your curvature.
So it essentially becomes a rough cut before you put the radius on the back.
Exactly. So that way when you go to drive the bus, you aren't going to be overworking your arms.
But you have to have an existing guitar to start that.
You do have to have an existing guitar. If you don't and you give me a call, I can give you the measurements, okay? Or I might need, pardon me, anybody here familiar with the Kit Guitar Forum? Okay, I also run the Kit Guitar Forum. It's not a Blues Creek, it's not a website to sell Blues Creek stuff. So you can ask that question in there, and I'll be more than happy to plot out and tell you what my pattern is, and you can rough it out on your own. And make it on a piece of masonite or hardboard. It's not rocket science. Make it easy.
You said you had two patterns, different radius?
I have two patterns for the different back radius.
15 and, what'd you say, 15?
15 and 20, and basically for a dreadnought and triple O's and smaller guitars. Okay? All right.
And maybe an alternative to doing that and stuff is, I've only made one guitar, but what the guy recommended for that was you could just have your template that was on the side, trace the line out after it's been bent, and actually after the top has been glued on, and then you can just use a hand plane to come down to that line. It takes it off really quickly and stuff, and then you use the sander to get the radius on there.
Yeah, well, I actually have a little jig that I run through my shaper. That really does work. But yes, just be aware of your grain orientation. You know, always remember that the wood grain is going to tell you the direction you want to go. Okay?
So John, I'm not sure I totally understood. On your tape method, you don't oversize the sides themselves before you bend them. You cut them exactly that size.
Well, they are actually oversized because you're measuring them with the added top and the back. So that's going to give you somewhere about 200 thousandths more than you need.
So you're going to take that eighth off of each side.
Somewhat. So
maybe
you're going to be in the ballpark at that point.
Got it. Once you got them bent, you got your rim or whatever, and then you take out your radius stitch.
Right.
The top is it's pretty much straightforward because it's somewhat flat.
Yeah, I always set it up with the top down on the table, and I do the back first. Because number one, the back is not the critical plate, the top is. So you have your top down in your mold, and once I put it in the mold, it doesn't come out till the top and back are on. That's when I true the back up first. And anybody here not familiar with my bending videos and prepping videos, then you see I put that parallel, when I flip the mold over, I slip the parallel under the neck, only under the neck block. And that's just there to keep the thing from rocking. And I will take my 28-foot dish and just gently come down between the neck block and the top of the sound hole and establish my 1.5-degree angle for my neckline. Okay?
I kind of understand that. Where I have my problem, it seems to be the back.
Okay, what happens to
Right,
your back?
So, well, I do it a couple different ways. I have, the rim assembly is in the mold.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can
Okay.
take and put the dish, actually I put the dish in my go bar deck.
Okay.
And it's just, you know, with the
Right.
concave facing up. Now, if I take, or I can put my whole mold down with whatever, the top or the back,
Mhm.
facing up. I have a vertical pipe that just goes into my workbench.
Okay.
I take your
Drive the
disc
bus.
with the hole in it, put in it, and just drive the bus.
Right.
With the back, is it flat to the table, on the top, going to the table? And when you got the disc on it, obviously you got something that pitches down quite a ways going to the neck.
Well, that's what this does. So when you bend it, you kind of pre-put the geometry in the side. So that when you go to drive the bus, 80% of your shape's already there, and all you're doing at this point with driving the bus is finessing the final shape.
Right, you're gonna hold the radius just a slight angle, it's not perpendicular.
Right. Well, you're going to have you're in a sphere, and the neck is always lower than the tail. The neck block is usually somewhere about 9/16 to 3/4 of an inch taper from the tail block. So your back should have this taper on it. See, that's actually the back up, top down. So when you bend it, you go to drive the bus, you can put points on your mold so you can measure half inch. There should be inch and a quarter, and then you can measure as you're working that down that you don't put a canter on your dish, so you make sure that you're coming it down nice and level. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So I'm still confused.
Okay, we'll unconfuse you.
But that's easy to do. I put my rim in my mold.
You do?
I leave about 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch all the way around, so that rim is level sitting in the mold. So when you put it on, when you put the rim, the top goes to the table,
Mhm.
goes down. That's fitting level with the table.
Correct.
So now your back of your rim, the top of that,
Mhm.
obviously if you look at it, it's going downhill.
It should.
All right. Now, if I use a perpendicular pipe in the center
Mhm.
of the body,
Right.
all right, and I put your disc on it, and that disc goes down level, it's not going to be, in other words, it's going down level this way, so it wants to
You
use the
slide it
shape.
back.
Okay, you don't want your disc to go down level. You want your disc to go down crooked, because your disc is going to perfect the radiusing to the tapered back.
You don't want your pipe.
You-
Well, I know I don't want to do that. When I went to Dave's,
Huh?
and I did it up at Dave's or whatever, we literally took the rim, and instead of being it flat on the table, we put like a 1 by something on one end where it actually lifted up the neck end of your back of your rim. So when you put the disc on it that way,
Level,
the disc was more level. In other words, you just took your rim, and instead of it be going downhill, made it so it was somewhat level.
I don't do it that way. What I do is I'll set my mold up on a set of parallels so that my mold is perpendicular to the top.
Okay.
Because that's going to be where I'm taking my measurements when I do the top. My drive the bus is dead center to the guitar, 4.5, right and left. And I let the dish tilt down.
Okay.
That's the way I do it. Then that way I can control, I know exactly what my taper is, and I can eyeball and I can see that my taper, and I can measure it using the mold. From here to here should be 9/16 to 3/4 more at the tail block than the neck block. And I do mark the rim with chalk, so I know exactly where I'm taking off, because you want to remove all the chalk. And you want to be careful that you don't wobble your disc, because if you're right-handed, do it around, be able to go around your device. Okay? Does that make
I
sense?
think so, yeah.
Okay.
I'm still struggling with this taper and trying to convert that to 3D.
Okay, the back has a radius in it.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so if you have a radius back, and like the waist goes into the curve and back out,
Yeah.
so you're starting back here, and as it comes in and then it goes at the waist, it wants to grow again, and then as it comes back out to the rim, it's going to come back down. So when you're going inside a curved space, so this is curved, the waist is in here, and if it's dead flat, you got all this material to grind down till you get to that arch in the back.
Okay. Where would the waist be on that?
Approximately 12 inches from the end.
Just
Yeah.
show me.
Okay.
I'm visual.
If this is your neck block right here,
I'm visual.
okay.
I'm visual.
So if we have 1.5 inches of trim here and here, right? Here's going to be approximately 3 3/4 inch. Here, I think it's actually 11 3/4 is the approximate area of where the apex of the waist will be.
Okay.
So that's going
the
to,
relationship.
right.
Mhm.
So you have this radius, all right? And as the rim, as your guitar is being shaped, you have this. So this here is going to be a higher spot because it's got to go into here, because it's got to come up to meet that curvature.
Right.
All right?
I think sometimes it's confusing because you're actually tapering, but you're not tapering because you're going in.
Yeah.
And so it looks like you've got a flat section.
Right,
Or
exactly.
You should,
Right.
but it's an illusion.
Yes, it is. It is an illusion.
I actually find it almost the reverse of that when you put the dish on top of it to sand it, that the center of the waist is actually down below because your curvature is going up this way.
You're not, then you're not grasping what's actually happening. So if you have this dish going on the rim, because the waist is going in, it's going to a higher point in the dish.
Right.
So think of this, you're in a sphere. So if you have a tangent line going across here, and this is the point of your waist, the waist actually has to grow and be higher so it hits that higher point of the curve.
Right.
Because you got to think you got a curve this way and you have the curve this way.
So you're actually going to take off of that rim on each end to bring that down so that the center touches.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what I'm saying is.
Yeah. So as
We're
you're
saying
going,
the same thing, but I'm just thinking it's different.
oh, that's true. I mean, we all tend to absorb geometry a little bit
I
differently.
guess when I see that, I always think of, okay, back's going on, I'm gonna have to pull it down.
You-
It isn't easy to
No.
do.
If you have the hole big enough in the rim, in the radius dish, you can just wobble it.
Yeah.
It finds its own.
Struggling with the
Yeah, it
3D.
should.
Yeah, it's going to find its own level. And the other thing that I want to make a point of, when you put your rim in before you start doing any radiusing at all, you want your neck block and your tail block and your waist spreader in. I mean, we want to talk more about bending, but if you want to talk about this, I'm more than happy to talk about that.
I'm just having trouble with the 3D.
There is a newer video we put up a year and a half ago about screwing in the neck block. I always found that by running a big long spreader in there, and then you have the waist spreader, you have all this crap to take out later. So what I've done is I'm actually using a screw through the mold to pull the neck block from the outside against my mold. That way my neck block is where it needs to be. If you don't control the neck block, then your neck block's going to go to this, and when you go to set the neck, you are not going to have a repeatable process, so every neck is going to be different, and it's going to
That's a lot of fun.
it's going to drive you nuts.
What do you use, just like a drywall screw?
Yeah, I use drywall screws and finishing screws, because I don't want to run a drywall screw at the neck or in the middle of the neck joint on the mold, because it will spread it. So you get a finish washer, that way you aren't distorting your mold.
And you drill through where the crack, where the joint
Yeah,
is.
I drill through the crack through the dowel, and I make that hole a little bit bigger than my drywall screw, and make sure that your drywall screw is shorter than the neck block. Okay? It's a good plus.
But I just point out that when I've done neck sets on Larson Brother guitars, they have the exact same screw hole
Yep.
in the neck block.
Yeah. That is something that I started doing probably 6 years ago, and I teach classes, and I've actually had necks that I did not have to set. They fit right in. And that's a case of, I'm really skilled. No, I was freaking lucky, but I'm teaching, so I'm the expert.
Do you do something similar on the tail block?
Well, the tail block, I do screw through, and there I don't mind going through. What I do is I plot the center of my tail block, and there I don't mind a screw hole going through because you're going to be drilling for an end pin. So there you are. You don't have to worry about that. I think that is the video. It was screwing in the neck block.
Yeah, I can't remember the title, but something like that.
Something like that. And you can contact me anytime, call me. I'll be more than happy to talk to you on the phone.
I do a bolt-on neck, so I've just started doing a carriage bolt through there.
There you go. You can do that.
Washer and
Yeah, for those of you that do bolt-on necks, just do like he said, plot where your hole is for your block and use that. Won't hurt you. That'll be fine. All right.
one question as far as relativity here.
Okay.
I tend to clamp my dish down and then drive my mold rather than the dish. Is there?
Does it work for you?
Yeah.
Then it's fine.
Okay.
No
reason to switch.
I'm not one of those that says my way's the only way. If you have a technique that works for you, make it an act of God to change. Because if it works for you, it works.
I didn't know if there was a good reason to do it the other way.
The way that I do, because this way, you see I have that on my granite plate, and it's the way I learned, so that's the way I do it. One advantage to turning the block, if you need to lower one side, I can lay my hand here, give a little push. But other than that, because I've done it that way.
I'm just freehanding
Yeah.
the frame. I'm slugging a lot more weight around.
Yeah.
But it also helps the sanding.
Well, driving the bus is a little bit more efficient, but if you're having fun doing it, knock yourself out.
Do you find it difficult to keep centered on the radius dish?
Not too much.
Guess it doesn't really matter.
That doesn't really matter. The other advantage to driving the bus, now I've drilled a hole in my plate and I stick a dowel in there and I can spin it.
That's what I do too.
Yeah, I can spin it. I like Bob Gleason has a little drum sander in his drill press, and he has this big table that he clamps on there, and he has the hole, and he just pushes it on there, and now he's got a power, and he comes down. So, whatever works for you.
You could use those knobs they used to put on the steering wheels in the 50s.
There you go.
Necker's knobs.
John, get back to side bending. You said 70 to 80,000 is what temperatures are you starting?
Okay.
I mean,
One
other than
thing.
the weight falling
Yeah.
off.
Okay. I have chunks of aluminum from my machinist days, and it might weigh 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds. Where's the eraser? Over here. Okay. I feel like I'm running the Olympic torch. Okay. Yeah, this time we're going to have blisters instead of blood. Okay, so this is your bending pattern. No, that's a piece of broken chalk. In fact, let me talk about the bending pattern really quick. In the old days, you remember they used to drill the holes tangent to the curves? They were using aluminum slats back then, and they needed those bars to support those aluminum slats. Now everybody has gone to spring steel. I prefer to use a tempered stainless steel because it doesn't rust and it's easy to clean up. So now, as long as you have holes here to keep your patterns separated, that's all that they're there for. In fact, if you saw my uke benders, I just have 2 or 3 dowels through there and a rib, and that's it. So if you put your slat sandwich in here, all right? I run my waist down here. So my waist call is just going to hold that. I'm going to call it friendly friction so that you can make adjustments. Mostly use that bend with my machines. If you go down to Harbor Freight, or better yet, just go get a piece of wood and do this. This is a little under 1/2 inch. All right? That catches that vertical slot in the bending machine. So that hooks the slot. That's your waist. Come down here, make a notch at 12 inches. That's where you want to pull the end of your side to. So now you can position it into the bender reasonably accurate. So I'm going to call this like a little story pole. Then I tend to put my weight, this is actually going to be a little bit longer. I put my weight about here. That holds the slat and the blanket together against the wood. And as the wood starts to soften, you'll hear your piece of hit the floor, now you're ready to bend. So in my case, I'm doing a lot of things, so I throw that on there, go drink my coffee, and then when I hear a thump, I go bend my wood. And that's it. It's just that it's the maintaining the heat against your wood to soften it. Now, you asked about temperatures.
I use binder clips to hold the slats
And
together.
that's fine. I used to use those little.
But I can't tell when it's softening.
Well, if you put a little weight there, you'll actually see it. You'll actually see it starting to come down.
I use bigger spring clamps. Put a big spring clamp on the end, and you can.
Yeah, you can see it.
About what kind of weight or pressure are you talking?
A pound, pound and a half. You don't want to lay a brick there, but something that weighs about 1.5 pounds will be just fine. When that goes down,
A fender dolly.
a fender dolly. Oh yeah, a little ticky-tacky thing. Yeah, that'll work. Put your coffee on there. When you clean up the mess, you're done. I've done that. I hate to tell you that. Yes, I have. So once that starts bending, you're going to notice that another thing, don't put the thermometer, are you using PIDs or the little cooking thermometers? Yeah, I have a PID controller a friend made me. It's wonderful, but I only know the temperature at that point, so I can move the cooking thermometer back and forth. I'm a firm believer in keeping it simple. Usually when you see about 225 to 250 degrees, at that point you're really ready to bend. And I just don't slam it down. We walk it down nice and easy. And I will often bend, let's say like my purfling. I take my purfling to the sides when I put it in the bender, and I can bend them at the same time. You can bend your bindings along at the same time. And then bend it to the front. Again, I'm going to take a look to make sure I'm wet. By this time, you should be about 275, 300. So I don't go much hotter than that to do the actual bending.
Yeah, I've been doing about 280. So.
Yeah, you're well in the safe zone. There are some woods that are a nightmare to bend. Padauk, that has always been problematic, and I found that with Padauk, there you might want to keep it 250, 275 for maybe 10 minutes, and keep adding water because you can set the variable. Okay, so set the variable, and now it's not that the water. How can I put this? The water helps to soften the cell. And it's
How do you add the water once you're got it all clamped up in the sand?
lift it up.
First.
Oh.
Yeah, no, low tech, squirt. And then once you know that you're good and wet, it doesn't hurt to put weight on the front too, and just let the wood tell you when it's ready to burn. The most wood that I've had, the most crackable wood is figured maple. All right? Figured maple is probably the worst one, and believe it or not, they like to be drier. Yes, figured maple likes dry. So what I generally do there is run them up to about 300, and that's when I start bending with maple. Okay? If you have, not all thin, first off, not all thin wood
Use any moisture, a little bit of Windex on
just
that?
a little bit, yeah, just a little bit. Damp, not wet, just lightly damp. And actually you'll see that maple, if you over wet it. Has anybody bent maple and just watched it keep bending when you're done?
Yeah.
You use too much water.
I'm binding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So especially the figured maple because the end, it's all end grain and it sucks in really quick.
Yeah, and it will bend better with a little higher heat and less water. But if you keep,
Ebony?
huh?
What about ebony?
Paint it black. I hate ebony. Ebony, if you want to build an ebony guitar, I think ebony is probably, I don't recommend it for a lot of woods. It's probably one that I would seriously consider using a steam box on. Because ebony is hard, dense wood, and the cells are really small. They're very tightly packed, and they don't want to crush. And I would probably...
So you would put it in the steam box and then transfer it to the bender?
Yeah, and if you don't have a steam box, again, that is where a good steam iron comes in handy.
Steam box is easy.
Yeah, they are. I really don't like to work with ebony too much because yeah, well, good luck. Yeah, I think when I bent ebony one time, I went through 3 sets till I got one to bend. The nice thing about ebony, you don't have to worry about book matching. So, yeah.
Unless it's got a little bit of stripe.
Yeah, oh, there you go.
I just built a set with the ebony and 300 seemed to work.
Thank you.
How long did you let it sit there? Did you get 300 and start bending immediately? Or did you-
No, well, like John is saying, you're seeing it starting to bend, starting to give, getting loose. And,
Yeah, don't rush it.
but don't rush it.
Did you
Don't
go
rush it.
thinner with it?
Huh?
Did you go thinner with it?
I didn't. I usually bend at about 85 thousandths,
Okay.
but that may be a little too thick.
Oh. Okay, and anybody here know Wayne Henderson and his group? I just want to mention this. Gerald Anderson, who was instrumental with Wayne and very well known in the Virginia bluegrass and guitar building, passed away, age 65. So I'm older. Yeah, just a kid. Okay. Getting tangentized here. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
When did that happen? Sorry.
I think 2 days ago.
I just talked to you.
I just, yeah, he was at the festival, looked good. Yeah. Yeah, Spencer found him in bed.
What about bending some of the other figures, was that walnut?
Walnut is forgiving. Walnut bends very well. Figured mahogany is also a good bender. Mahogany also is another one that's going to be a little bit less water and a little bit more heat. But the majority of woods, I start bending at 250. I'm done about 275. Jimmy Edmonds has one of my first bending machines when I use light bulbs. And he's using light bulbs and the heating blanket. I know some people use 2 heating blankets.
I do.
Go right ahead. I don't, but go right ahead. If it works for you, do it.
What's the order of your sandwich?
Okay, slat
From the bottom up.
from the bottom up. My order of my bending sandwich is going to be slat, wet paper, wood, wet paper, slat, heating blanket.
What kind of paper, John?
Okay, my favorite paper is butcher wrap. Now, because the amount of I use, I just get a 12-inch piece of roll of butcher wrap, run it through my bandsaw, go to Michael's, get some tracing paper. You really don't need the full 32-inch piece. A 24-inch piece is going to be fine because that gentle bend from the apex of the curve down to your tail block and your neck block aren't critical. It's the major curve.
There's no wax in the butcher rest?
No, it's untreated. Okay?
Just the order on those again, was
Slat,
slat, paper,
paper,
wood,
wood,
paper.
paper, slat, blanket. And those of you that are afraid to rub against the blanket, you may use another slat of aluminum or anything.
Just to protect the blanket?
Yeah, well, I finally wore one out after 18 years. So the blankets that I sell are actually a commercial unit. I used to be a machinist in molding, and we actually use these in an industrial setting. That's why I went with them.
Is it the same kind of thing that hooks up to like the temperature control unit that LMI sells? Or?
Mine doesn't because they use like a bastardized plug.
Right.
Keep it simple. I use what's called a router speed controller, which is actually a VSI switch. It's not a rheostat, and I would recommend not using light dimmers because the light dimmer becomes part of the circuit, and what happens is you're actually straining your blanket. A VSI switch is taking, let's imagine electricity is a straight piece of string. What it's doing is sending little pieces in there with gaps, and it would be like if you're at your light switch, and you'll actually find that when you dial it in, it will hold that temperature extremely stable. Mr. Wendt.
Did you once put the blanket against the paper and would have the slat on top so it would go?
Okay, that's a good point. On some woods, if I think I need to, if ever you want to put the wood or the blanket and the wood against each other, I learned this really quickly. You have to have a barrier there because if you just spray your wood, put the blanket on top there and bend, the wood is going, the grain's going to be raised in the pattern of the heating element in that blanket. And as a result, when you go and finish, it isn't long till that.
Grape City.
No, not Scrape City, in the finish. Remember the saw marks on old Martins? That's what happens, they come out. So you gotta have wet paper, and you can, if you want to, use aluminum foil. I'm not a big fan of wrapping it, but I know some people do, and you're welcome to use aluminum foil instead of paper. I've always had issues with that because it doesn't let the wood dry out. Pay very close attention to when you're taking, you want to know how hot your blanket is, not how hot the wood is. Water is a refrigerant. So while you're applying the heat, you're creating steam. Steam is 212 degrees in its natural state, if you aren't putting it under pressure. So that's actually cooling the blanket, so to speak. And all blankets that I use are 5 watts per square inch, because I know you can buy them at 2.5 watts and they're cheaper. But once you put the heat load on there, yes, they get hot. Once you put them under thermal load, they drop the heat, and now you got to wait for the heat to build back up. By that time, the cell sets and crap. So 5 watts per inch blanket is what I use. Now, you bend by hand. Let me discuss a little bit for your hand benders. Wood, as you can discover, there's a feel there, as you've discovered. Grab the steam iron and use that. Don't be afraid also to put a wet paper towel on top there, but you got to really learn to control that. I think there's some guys that use the electric charcoal grill starters, and they work pretty good, and that will give you a little bit more opportunity to control it. And I just recommend maybe 20 minutes before you want to bend, turn it on there and give it a chance for the heat to stabilize. But I actually bent woods on a pipe just using the heat from the iron. So instead of bending it, I was softening it up with the steam. Then by the time I could dry it out and I could set the bend, and away it went. Were anybody here for the bending demonstration maybe 6 years ago or 8 years ago? Steve Kovacic and I, he bent by hand, I bent by machine. Both processes are going to take about 45 minutes. I'm done in 4, and I can drink coffee while I watch him do the rest of the bending. The bender just gives you repeatability. But learning to bend by hand, yes, I want to sell a bender because I like to buy colored label beer, but you can bend by hand.
When I used to bend by hand, but I finally made a bender because I get the waist bent and then I start bending the sides, but it seems like my waist it kind of opens up and I'm chasing that, and then I'm bending the side and I'm chasing these curves all the way around, and I can never get them where I need them.
Well, you might be not giving it enough time to set. When you bend it and you get it bent, hold that in the bent position until it's cool, because it's warm. Wood is thermoplastic, so heat will allow that to go.
Can I throw in here? I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that there's a critical temperature in wood where the molecules will slide.
No, it does not do that.
It does not.
That is not true.
Okay.
What happens is, and they aren't molecules, they're cells. The cells collapse. Okay, that's how you're bending wood. You are taking a cell and you are collapsing it. You are not stretching it, you're not sliding it, you're collapsing it. And that's what affords the wood to bend. Now, those of you who makes your own molds or has your own design, do you understand how you make a bending pattern for that?
Well, what I do is I make the mold,
Okay.
and then I cut it out with a bandsaw,
Mm-hmm.
so that the outside of my mold, the inside of my mold is the outside of the guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and then my bandsaw cut basically cuts out the width of the side,
Okay.
and I sand on a oscillating spindle sander the inside mold. I take the piece that comes out, cut it in half, and glue them together.
Okay. Okay. What I do, and what I recommend you do, because if you're bending with a pattern and you aren't getting a good repeatable process.
I'm getting it with my pattern.
Okay. Oh, but you are correct. You start with the outside mold. Okay, let me make it a little drawing here. So if you want to, you should start with your outside shape. And you are right in starting with your mold. So this is your mold, all right? That's your mold.
Yeah.
This is your center line. All right? Your bending pattern should actually be wider than your mold. And the reason why you want that way when your hold down's holding that against the pattern, you aren't putting a kink in it, or you aren't letting it flare out. The second thing you want to be cognizant of is you want to be square to the points of curvature. And I generally bring these down, and I actually just eyeball about 1/4 of an inch here, and just what I'm going to call a healthy 1/8 of an inch here. And here I'm just going to give it a little bit more, because the wood will spring back to a given degree. There is no perfect pattern because not all wood is going to bend identical. So if you overbend it just ever so slightly, it will go back into your mold and you will just get it to fit in there real nice and easy. Because we don't worry about it being perfect if you're building with an outside mold. If you're free building, then that's something else. But if you're hand bending, do that. Get it to bend, dry it out, and then let it cool. Because if there's any residual heat in there, it's going to relax and come back out. And then as soon as you're done building it, put your mold on top of it on the table so it keeps it in shape, because it will want to relax. All right?
You had said now with this spring steel, like we get from you, 2 rails are enough.
Yes.
It won't
Yeah.
get in the middle.
Right on the plywood, doesn't it?
Yeah, it rides the plywood. It doesn't ride on the crossbar.
Okay.
I generally call them separators.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, but you don't get any bellying in the metal.
No.
Okay.
If I do see bellying in the wood, mahogany is probably the worst one for it. The 2 woods that you can bend that are flat sawn are maple and mahogany. The problem with mahogany is the density of the wood is a lot different in the summer growth than the winter growth, and they will often want to cup a little bit. So that is something that you have to pay attention to at your piece of wood. Jimmy Edmonds, for that kind of a situation, he's bending them a little bit cooler. He's doing it somewhere about 275, and he holds it at 275 degrees for about 30 minutes. He doesn't go any higher than that. I thought
So
that
higher temperature makes it cup worse?
apparently it does. I don't know.
Because I've got some Goncalo Alves
Yeah.
that cut pretty bad.
No. And sometimes that might be a case that maybe there was too much water too. I've been a lot of Goncalo Alves, I think they pronounce it. And I like that wood. And I never really had, you probably even got it for me.
No, I got a bunch of it.
At GMC, and that's probably why they had it at GMC, because of cup.
Yeah.
You know,
So go to the cooler temperature and less likely.
try it. You know, let me know. Maybe get the steam iron out and put a pipe in your vise and flatten it down.
Iron flat.
Yeah, see if you can iron it flat.
I'll say another thing from the repair world is that when you use flat sawn sides, over time, even if it was flat when the guitar was made, it starts to ripple.
Yeah.
You see those ripples through the finish. So if you have anything to work on that, it becomes very, very much more problematic to try to get everything to line up and stay where it ought to be.
It does. And there's 2 woods that you can buy to practice on that work very well. A couple. Anybody have any sawmills near you? Catalpa. Catalpa actually makes a nice guitar. White oak and poplar. Poplar kind of works a lot like mahogany. White oak tends to bend a lot like rosewood, and you can play with that. And white oak actually makes a good guitar. They're indigenous to Pennsylvania, and they do make great guitars, believe it or not.
And Ken Parker makes his arch tops with poplar backs.
Yeah.
And sides.
Yeah, it was used for quite a while.
For violins.
Yeah. Yeah, and birch is another one. Was it not Gibson? Was it?
The first Lloyd Lord guitars were made out of birch.
The first
L5s.
L5s were made with birch.
Yeah.
And also a lot of the A model.
And I think the L1s, weren't some of them birch?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those old Stellas had birch tops as well.
Yeah.
Poplar's
I'm talking about the old
much, much misaligned wood.
Oh, it certainly is. And poplar is a very rapid growth. In fact, Martin built an entire guitar out of poplar, braces, everything. And it actually sounded pretty good. Sounded really good. Any other questions on, yes, sir?
The questions on the bending form itself. You were talking about hand bending with regard to the kind of over shoot that you're designing into there. Does that apply also if you're going to use machine bending as well, the kind of the 1/4 inch on the back end,
Yeah.
the 1/8 inch?
In fact, that is on
On the
bending.
machine, yeah.
Yes, that is on the bending.
Okay.
You bend your two bouts first, then the waist?
Yes. Okay.
You put the waist down like halfway first?
Yeah, I bring the waist down, the line from the bouts from here, come down about halfway. Do the bouts, lock it in. What you're doing is actually putting it in tension. So those of you that have the bending machine, just so that you can see what's happening, just put the slats in. Run the waist down, do the bouts, and you're going to see gaps at the upper and lower bout. Now, put the bouts down, run the waist, and you're going to actually watch those slats pull right down onto your pattern. And it's going to give you a much more repeatable and reproducible process. Boy, that's a lot to say.
Cutaways.
Huh?
Cutaways.
Okay, cutaways. Oh, that's a good excellent. Okay.
Before we move on, I just have, you said that Jimmy Evans holds his for 30 minutes. Do you hold your heat for a long time?
15 minutes.
50. So you leave it at like 275 or 300 for 15 minutes?
Well, you know how on the controller it has full and variable.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I get it on the pattern, I'll turn it to full. I'll even let it go up to 350 degrees.
It doesn't scorch at that temperature?
No, in order to scorch wood, you're going to have to hit closer to 400, or you're going to have to leave it at 350 over time. So you're looking at a time element for scorching.
Right.
Lace wood scorches quickly. Okay, I don't know why it does, but it do. Okay, so once you get it down there, I generally do run my temperatures up to 325, 350. But if you're having cupping, you know, it could be a heat issue or it could be a water issue, because not all wood bends the same. So keep a little note, keep a notebook there.
I found that vitamin sides scorch quite easily.
Well, they're very thin.
They're very thin.
They're very thin, and most of them are maple.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they use a very hot bender because it's such a tight bend. There is a point where the cell collapses and you are not going to get it to move any further, and that's it.
So what temperature do you cook it at, like for 15 minutes or?
Oh, okay, when I have it bent, then once I hit my high point, I just dial in somewhere above boiling point to 250 just to get the water out. That's all. I'm just trying to dry the wood out.
That helps to hold the form, reduce spring back, right?
What's that?
That helps reduce spring back when you take it off.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. But the reason why you get a lot of spring back generally happens after you take it out and it relaxes. So I always set my mold on top of the side. And if you do get a little spring back, you're putting it in the mold and you're going to finesse it there anyway. For cutaway, what?
Do you ever do a second round of heat?
There are some times you just have to do that.
Like when you do with 2 left sides.
You can unbend them 2 times. The 3rd time you're pretty much screwed, and alcohol was involved. One way to know if you got a good bend, before you release the waist in the upper bout, take the lower bout up, hold the slat down, pick it up, and if it's sticking down there, you got it. Another thing that you can do, there are some woods that are very crackable as you want to take them out of the machine. Get yourself some 4-penny nails. Bend them like that. Here's your pattern, here's your little, hook that into the tube, grab the bottom slat with this. Cutaways, and you might want these for cutaways. There's 2 techniques that I use to do cutaways when I want to take them out of the machine. And one of them will be using those little nails, and I will release it, that way I can get the top slat out. I don't have the bottom slat pushing against the cutaway. Because we had a class, and before I could tell the student to stop, he literally blew the whole front end of his Brazilian rosewood cutaway. Repairable. Believe it or not, it is repairable. And we put it back together, you could never tell it was hurt. But just, here's what you're gonna do.
Would fence staples work instead of nails?
What's that?
Fence staples rather than nails?
They possibly would. Yeah, they probably would. Just, you got some, go ahead and use it. So here's your cutaway. Okay, it ain't pretty, but you all understand. Okay, you know the pattern is cut off here, right? You have your cutaway ram going in here. That's your table. All right? Cut yourself a 2x4 or a piece of 4x4 that is level to this point. Okay? Doing cutaways, it gets a little bit more tricky because you're actually doing 2 bends at once. And you might think that, oh man, they're difficult. They really aren't. Here's where I will run the waist down almost all the way down because I don't want to kick things. Your own technique on how you want to do the joint with the cutaway. You do know that you trim the neck block for a cutaway. So that you want to pay attention to. So when you go to start doing the bend, you have this horn, you're bringing the cutaway call down. You're grabbing the upper point and you're actually grabbing that sharp corner of your pattern. So by having that piece of wood here, I have machinist blocks that I use. Then when you're doing this, hold up on the free end of the slat, start cranking. Once that waist call or the cutaway call gets into the pattern, that's going to come out of your hand and ride your let's call that a staging block, and then run that puppy home. And just before you bend it, take a look at it, give it a hello squirt, and crank her in. And this is the key here. The pattern now for the cutaway isn't so much your bending pattern, it's the ram. Okay? So if you're going to do a cutaway, remember that your cutaway is making the form, not the pattern. Does that make sense to you? Yep. If you do it by hand, go get poplar. The more you do it, there's no reason not to bend by hand, but it is a the machine just takes all of the variables. In any process, the more variables that you can control, the better off you are. Okay.
You cranking that down pretty slowly?
Oh no, I'm good. Once I get her going, I'm running it in. Remember, at this point, the slats are pressing it.
Yeah.
So the slats are actually helping to support the wood. I used to go slow and I ended up cracking a lot, so then I didn't. Okay, now when I go to take it out, there's 2 techniques for taking it out so that you don't damage things. I will loosen the lower bout and the waist. And at this point, the slat is trying to lift it up, but you still have part of your waist call here, so it's not really fighting that curve. Then I'm going to back off my cutaway ram, 3-4 bends. I'm literally going to push the pattern in a little bit and pull the pitting bolt out. Grab the ram, lift it up as you pull out, and that will help relieve a lot of the stress of the lower slat pushing against and it usually comes out pretty good. If you're bending Brazilian rosewood, don't take any chances. Use the fence nails, the bent nails, whatever you want to do. Okay?
Can you go over that again? I didn't quite understand the nails, what you were using.
Okay,
before.
the nails, those little U things,
Yeah.
they're going to go into the tube, and you're going to put it underneath the wood and grab the bottom slat, only the bottom slat, because that will release the blanket and the top slat so you can take the wood out. So you're just basically holding the bottom slat.
slat. Yeah.
I don't
So
I
the
don't quite
slat
understand
doesn't
what
flatten
you're
out?
saying in the tube. What are you putting in?
In the bending pattern, they have tubes, okay, that
Yeah,
go around.
right.
So you go into that tube and you grab the bottom slat using the tube. It's the only
Oh,
way.
I see.
Okay, got it?
Yeah.
Okay, now, who's,
Oh, can you say that again, how you retract the cutaway?
right,
And how do you take that out again?
okay. I will back off on the cutaway ram.
Yeah.
3-4 turns.
Yeah.
You know, just enough that you can now push the pattern forward to get that pinning bolt out. Okay, then you grab hold of the cutaway ram and gently lift it up as you're coming out, because that kind of holds all of this in a little bit of a bend. The more you get it out, the less force is being pushed on that cutaway, which is trying to flatten it out, so you reduce the risk of cracking the cutaway. Okay? Does that?
And that's where it's really helpful to keep that bottom slat pinned down.
Yeah, that really does.
Run through just taking out one without a cut.
Oh, that's easy. Go up the upper bout, back off the waist, take off the upper, the other bout. You know how I had that spring hold, the call? Give that thing a slap, pull that out, and pull it out. They come out. I don't think I ever broke a standard side pulling it out.
I've done it, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's easy. Watch my video. You'll just see how it comes.
And how thin do you go for the cutaway side? Do you do the whole side or just that area?
I do them all at 75,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with that. I tried doing them thinner. When I'm done sanding a side, I don't mind if it's down to 65,000. So I'm figuring on leaving myself about 10 thousandths to level off the sides during the finish process. Now, you are going to have a guitar side that's going to cut. All right? And I call this process finish filling. And some people say it doesn't work. I've had guitars out there for 20 years that I've done it, and it does. You do want to level down as much as you can get out. So I will take my sides down. I won't go past 60 thousandths. So let's say I have a 10 thousandths bowl here. So I'm doing my finishing. I'll give that an extra shot or two, and I slowly build that up. And then I generally let that sit maybe 2 weeks, because that has to cure, otherwise it will shrink and show a little bit. And then I go through my regular finish process, and it usually comes out pretty good. You can fill up little voids like that building up the finish. Now, if you got 1/8 of an inch, you're basically screwed.
Now, if you think the wood is doing that while you're constructing, do you put more internal bracing there?
I used to use a little spruce side rib and then try to pull it back, and over time they all failed. So I gave up on that. I went back to the Martin style, just using rib, because I build very traditional Martin stuff mostly. So I just went back to using the ribbons. And talking about ribbons, when I talk about ribbons, I'm talking about side supports, because he can tell you that's the way Martin did them. 9 on the side. Did Gibson have it? I don't even think Gibson put stuff in there.
Sometimes they did,
Yeah, but
but
not often.
there's nothing that Gibson did twice.
No, and
Depending on the phase of the movie.
yeah.
When you glue your ribbon in, how do you get it so that the glue doesn't seep through the ribbon
Okay.
and look like wet panties or something?
Okay. What I use is fish glue or Type-On. I use 5/8 polyester ribbon. I can't remember the name that I get it, but you can find it at Walmart. I cut my pieces. I just snip them to how long I need. I do not soak them. I used to soak them. Now I just kind of spray them with a little bit of water. If I'm using Type-On, I lay a nice bead of Type-On on there, and I just kind of work it with my finger or like a piece of scrap wood. And when the wood, after about 2 minutes, when the wood stops being watery, then I put it on the side. Will it weep through
So
a
you
little
put it
bit?
on the wood, but not on the ribbon. I've been putting it on the ribbon.
I put it on the ribbon.
But when I rub it, it squishes through the...
Yeah, and you want it to.
Oh.
Because the glue is going to stick to the wood. The glue goes into the material, and that's what's holding it on.
Ah.
And the,
I just continue, but there's another technique I want to
Okay.
tell you, because I could tell you the way Martin did it way back in the day.
okay, well, let me hear you.
Okay, so it's kind of an offshoot of the traditional hide glue veneering.
Mhm.
So this is the way they put the ribbon on back in the day. So what they would do is they would take the ribbon, they would put hide glue. You can also do this with fish glue,
Mhm.
but the natural glues are what you want to use. You put it on the back of the ribbon, you put the ribbon into place, and then you have a damp, not wet, damp sponge, and you just run it over, and everything sucks to the surface. You don't get any glue coming out, and everything's absolutely to the surface. Now, people have been using this for hundreds of years with, say you have a hardwood that you want to veneer on a softwood. You do precisely the same thing. You paint on the back of the veneer, you lay it down, and then you hit it with your damp sponge, and everything just sucks down. You don't need clamps or anything.
So you're telling me you let the glue dry and just like an envelope, lick it off?
What's that?
Are you letting the...
No. What you're doing is the wet glue is on the underside of the ribbon.
Yep.
You're putting the wet glue and the ribbon in the position that you want it to be, and then you run it over with a damp sponge, and everything just pulls into the wood and stays there.
When I use fish
Just a
glue...
little bit with the sponge, or?
No, you just wet it a little bit. That's all it needs.
It doesn't wipe away.
For fish
So
glue...
sometimes you get a little squeeze out,
Yeah.
maybe, and you just wash that off later after it's dry.
But it doesn't just drag the ribbon down with it when you're
No,
wiping with the
not at all.
sponge?
There's so much suction that it just tamps down.
I stopped using them years ago.
You're
Yeah,
fine
well,
with
with
that.
fish glue, I instead of a sponge, I use a wet paper towel. But yeah, I do that
Exactly,
with fish glue.
it's the same exact thing.
Because with fish glue, you don't need to wet it.
You know, when you do that, you do that before you put your lining on?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. And what I will do, once, 10, 15 minutes of tax, I take a fresh razor blade and I trim it off. Because if you leave it hanging out over, the glue dries, tends to curl it, and then it just puts an airspace underneath there. So give it a couple of minutes and just snip it flush. Okay. Thank you. But those guys that work with hot high glue, God bless them. They worked in a room that was 98 degrees year round.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like like at Martin, they would do a couple things with that. One is they'd have what's called a hot room, and they'd have hot sandbags in there. So anything they wanted to clamp, they were like you either wrap with the cloth to glue the body together, or you're using hot sandbags on other things, it's just because when you keep everything at that temperature, 95 degrees or so, the glue wicks into the wood the best. That's the only way to use hide glue to keep a bridge on the top. If you try to hide glue with a bridge into cold wood, it's just going to fly off at some point. So it makes for a more structural joint. And the other thing that they would use that hot room for was that you have a lot of oils and pitch and whatnot in rosewood. And you just leave the rosewood on the radiator and it starts to bubble out a little bit. So it becomes a lot easier to work and a lot easier to finish after that.
And by the way, introduce yourself and tell them what you do.
Oh, okay. My name is Jason Marshall, and I run the repair shop at Retrofret in Manhattan. We're a vintage guitar dealer.
Yeah, so he knows what he's talking about. Okay.
Can you say prayer and just negative 48?
Yeah.
Some people can get stuck.
Yeah.
Actually, Mabel has stocks that you can use.
Yeah.
You just have to have all.
5/8 polyester. You can get a Walmart. Now, and Martin used 2 or 3 different ribbons through the years. At one point, they actually had a brown adhesive tape.
Yeah.
So the purpose of them, depending upon who you want to hear, it's not going to prevent a side crack. Basically, it was supposed to be there in the case of a catastrophic accident that you didn't blow your crack from one end to the other. I've used wood. Wood doesn't work any better, and I think wood, it's a pain in the butt, so I just go with the ribbon.
And I don't like to use wood because it is running cross grain. So if you're a player, and when you hand this off to a musician, they're never going to keep the humidity the way us Luthers will. The wood will shrink on the side, but the rib won't.
Yeah.
And that could be a source of tension.
Yeah, so the wood ones can actually cause side cracks. And then you see people who build these, almost like braces on the side, thinking that that's going to tie the vibration of the top to the back. It doesn't. The sides do that.
Collings only puts one in the back of the large boat, the lower boat. They put one mahogany brace in the guitar.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I looked inside and saw no.
In fact, Martin, I don't even think they did them, they only did that in the dreads.
Yeah.
Yeah, so-
Well, actually, smaller bodies going way back.
Yeah, way back.
Right, way back.
But I don't think
Not-
they use them now.
Not anywhere near the modern era.
So Martin still uses just the tape?
No, well, no, they actually, because it's off-fall, so it's free. So when they cut their sides, they just use headstock veneer cuts that they do. That's why they use it. What,
But it's
in
like,
that-
like 80 thousandths or something.
Yeah, it's 65, 80,000. And they changed that, what, in 84? Somewhere in there. So yeah, they used ribbon up to that point. And now back in the custom shop for the golden era authentics and some of the customs, they went back to the ribbon. And the ribbon, by the way, goes underneath the kerfing. And some of the old stuff on Martins, they actually nestled it up over the loads. And they had solid ribbon lining in the old ones that they loaded up on.
Are you leaving the ribbon under the line?
Is it yours?
And it doesn't keep the line from sitting flush?
Sure. That works.
Yeah.
Martin did that for, let's see, 150 years.
Just a white fabric of some sort?
Actually, as I told him, 5/8 inch brown polyester ribbon. They used linen, they used polyester, and I think what they were using linen first, because that was available, then they
They
went
might
to
have used
polyester.
silk or something for a while.
It was that was in the
Way back.
1880s, because I have an pre-1850 217 that has a white material in there. I don't think it was cotton. I tend to think it might have been hemp.
Right, yeah. Either that or, like, I'm not sure what it was. I was thinking either hemp or silk or something like that.
I don't, it's too coarse, I think, for silk. Okay. Next one. Who else would like to pick my brain?
What about,
I don't use it anyway.
Sorry, you got a question. No, I was just saying East Indian rosewood, like what's your, I've had it ripple on me, so I figured out since that I've used too much moisture.
Probably.
But,
East Indian rosewood is one of the even Brazilian bends reasonably well. So take a look at your is it plantation or natural East Indian?
I think it's probably plantation.
Okay, white grain,
Yeah.
real white grain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might just be the wood because you have this soft area, and the ripple shouldn't be. It might be minor. It shouldn't
It's
come out.
pretty minor.
Yeah, that'll come out in
In the sand side, I just thought, yeah, there's a way to avoid it.
Yep.
And you had mentioned, do you want to measure the temperature of the blanket, not the wood itself? I would have thought just the opposite. So do you, like I use a thermocouple to monitor the temperature, so you would put it underneath the blanket, not the wood. I put it
Well,
under
if
the
you
wood
put
first.
the temperature probe on the wood,
Yeah.
as it gets hot, it gets soft. You're going to put a divot in the side.
Yeah, it's always a part that's going to come out of
Yeah.
the,
Well, see, the problem with that is because the moisture is not giving you. You're getting a reading of how hot it is per se at the moisture point.
yeah, which you say is not going to go much above boiling temperature
Yeah.
then.
So you're getting a false read.
I guess my thought was that I wanted to allow the temperature to kind of equilibrate, give it time to equilibrate from the blanket, because it's going to take time to penetrate through to the bottom of the wood.
And that won't happen until it dries out. And at that point, you're no longer going to be able to bend it.
Mhm.
So the moisture allows for heat penetration to the hemocellulose layer of the cell.
Mhm.
That's the area you want to collapse. All right?
Mhm.
So once that gets hot, in it goes and it starts to bend.
Mhm.
And most temperature cracks are going to go, I should say, most water issue cracks are going to go straight across the piece of wood. If you get a crack that kind of comes and follows the grain, that's you. Okay?
I use a thermocouple.
Okay.
I usually put it between the wood and the blanket. You're saying it should be,
I prefer it on the blanket because of the moisture content of the wood. With you putting water in, you're boiling off, so therefore you're getting more or less a steam reading. And wood's going to bend actually probably about 200 degrees. It's going to start bending. So you're not worried about so much the wood, you want the heat there, and then what you're doing with the heat to set the bend, you actually want to get the water out of there. So when I run it up to 350, 375, I'm not so much heating the wood. As you said, you want the equilibrium in there. What I'm doing is getting more of a heat source to go to the wood because I got to drive that moisture out in order to get the cell to set. And it is not going to set till it's dry. It's just
Tom, one thing I'm having a hard time following is saying you're running it up to 375, but you're bending it at
for some woods, yes.
200, 250.
Yeah, what that's doing, the higher temperature is to get the moisture out. That's what I want to do. I want the moisture out of that wood.
After you bend it, you're running up to 375?
Yeah, because I put all that water in there, I got to get that water out. Okay, so that's the only reason that I'm really going that high. And one way to know that you got a good bend, hold that bottom slat, lift the, take the hold down off the bottom end, take a look. If that bottom end is hanging on there, you were successful. All right?
If you're hand bending and you got maybe thin here, run out the
Yep.
wood, you see fibers start to lift up,
Yep.
are you just screwed or what can you do?
That's where the steam iron comes in handy.
Okay.
Because when you're bending on a hot pipe and you're bending, you have this happening. When you get the iron on there, now you're pressing it. So you're more forming it because now you're using the weight there. And once you start getting an air gap off of your hot pipe, you're not getting heat there anymore. So now you're heating top and bottom. The steam is actually getting moisture in there, which is allowing for better penetration. It's just conducting the heat better. Because all of those air spaces in the wood cells, wood's actually an insulator.
That'll probably be more than a slat on top.
Most of the time you can get it with the slat, but if I hand bend anymore, I just grab the iron because it's right there and it's a no-brainer.
I've never been successful at using, on a cutaway, to use an appliance, on a bender, pushing that in.
Okay.
Maybe it's because I'm bending my size too thickly to begin with.
How thick are you
I'm
making it?
85,000.
85 it probably will work. The thing is, it might be taken out too soon.
No,
what do you have?
They actually crack or break as I push in.
Okay,
that
and
way.
how do you do it?
Same as I would normally do, rolling the waist down.
Well, what kind of stack are you using? How are you putting your wood in?
Same way you're talking about, a slat, and I use foil. A slat, foil wrap, wood, heating blanket, then another slat, and that's the sandwich.
Okay, in 85, I'd at least take it down to 70.
Okay.
75, I think would probably be okay. What temperature are you bending it at?
Usually, this all came from Charles Fox years ago.
Okay.
Run it to 300 degrees to begin with.
Well, that was when they had the light bulbs.
No, he was using heat.
Was it
blanket
like
at
that?
that time. That was in 2010.
Yeah, I think that's too high of a temperature.
Yeah. Okay.
What's really fascinating is I, like you, thought that it had to get hot. I found that when you're in there, because of the water, once I realized the water and the steam was actually giving me a false reading on the heat, you'd be surprised at how low of a temperature you can bend wood.
I had not considered that.
Yeah.
You just talked about it.
Yeah, so next time you do it, when you get about 250, start cranking that puppy in there. Just make sure that there's good moisture in there before you do it. And do you have one of my machines or one of your?
It's one of mine.
Okay, then just, once you start, that little block up there to help write that in really does help a lot. Okay.
Even if you start with a little thicker side than that, would it make sense just to thin out the cutaway area?
Yeah, you can do that. Take it over to, if you have a belt sander, just, well, the curvature of that structure is very strong. Once you put that in there, that is extremely strong. I will say for every 25 neck sets, I might see a cutaway. Because that really, you got a smaller neck block, and it carries load more efficiently because all of that shear is now changed. How many? I mean, granted, there are more standard guitars and cutaways, but I don't see a lot of cutaways that require neck sets. It's very seldom.
The only cutaways that require neck sets were built in New York, where they really didn't care about the fit of the tail joint. So many factories simply didn't care, and it's usually because the joint or the block is coming loose or something, and then you have to set the cutaway.
Okay.
John, when do you use the Super Soft over Windex?
I now use Windex over Super Soft.
Okay.
Number one, it's cheaper. I can get it at the grocery store, and if I gotta clean my car windows, I can. What time is it? We're getting near the end. I mean, please, as long as you've got questions, I'll stand here, but, you know, we've had a great couple of days, and,
Have you ever gotten into laminated sides or doing any, what do you think about those?
oh, they're fine. That actually has been used a long time. Most of the people that do them use a vacuum bag to put them together. From an engineering standpoint, you're sharing the stress, so you don't have any one point where the stress can go through the sides. I personally do not use them because I'm a more traditional builder, but it is absolutely a fine way to do things. It does work.
John, this is a bit off topic, but when we were talking about the profile before for the back, what about the top when we put the 1.5 degree angle in? What method do you use?
That's where I use the 28-foot dish.
So do I, but then you want that flat. You don't want it rounded.
Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm dropping my 28-foot dish parallel with the existing top. I'm only removing wood from the neck block to the top of the sound hole.
Right. Okay.
What happens down at the tail block is a result of that.
Yeah.
When I'm done, I flip my dish to my flat side. I want to see 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch rise off of my tail. And all I want to do is just give that a little bit of a rub. It doesn't take much. Now you've created that 1.5 degree angle into your side, but I perfect it at the end in the next set addendum and the initial next set video, where I take the plane of the neck joint to the fretboard onto the top.
Okay.
But I do prefer about 10,000ths drop off from the neck block to the sound hole to allow for a certain amount of movement through humidity off that transverse brace.
All right, that makes sense.
Okay?
Yeah, okay.
And you know these guys can call me or email me.
You said for figured mahogany, similar to maple, you go a little bit drier, but you also said lower temperature instead of higher for
A
like
little
maple?
high, for maple, is less water.
Less water, but
But I
higher
use a little bit
temperature.
more heat.
Right.
Because now I don't have the water for the conductivity, so I have to get a little bit more heat in there before I start bending.
But I thought you said something slightly different for figured mahogany. Also drier, but I thought you said also less heat.
That's for cupping.
That's for cupping.
Less heat to eliminate, or try to eliminate.
Yeah,
cupping.
I'll try to do that at about 275. Okay, if I think I'm going to get company wood, I'm going to do it at 275.
Yeah.
Most of the time in the bending machine, you're done in 4 or 5 minutes.
Right, but, and then that was the other question. How long do you hold it generally in the bender after that?
There, with the 275 temperature, because I'm going slower, I'm going to rely on the weight on the slats to tell me when the wood's relaxed enough to bend. And I'm still going to just do about 15 minutes, somewhere in that 220, 250 range, just, again, to dry the wood out.
Yeah.
Because if you pull that out with residual heat or moisture, it will spring back.
Right. But so the 15 to, what I mean by hold time is the time after you've completed the bend. You let it sit for another 15 to 20 minutes to drive the moisture off.
And again, pull your lower bout, take a look at how the wood's sticking to the bottom slat. If you need to cycle it again, usually if that happens, I'll cycle it and then just leave it in the bender overnight.
So you bend the binding and purfling at the same time as the sides, just put them right up against it?
Sure.
And you would do that even with the cutaway and even pushing all that in?
Sure.
Okay.
And now, the one thing, because I sell the stuff, I actually make a whole wide piece of all of those, like herringbone or something. But if you're only doing a little bit, and yeah, it will hold it off the side, you know, because the purfling is a little bit heavier than the side, it's still going to bend. You'll be fine. If you're going to bend purflings alone, make sure you put a binding with it. If you don't, it's just going to lay over.
So with purflings, I guess I'm a little bit, I'm unfamiliar with that because the way I did mine, again, for the classical guitar was he glued all the veneers together in sheets. So, and then put it in a mold, glued it all together, so it's all formed, preformed, then you just slice them off, so that you don't have to bend them at all. They're done.
Since I don't do that, I buy them already made, and I get them in little pieces.
And you
I
gotta
have to
bend
kind of put the stack back together to bend it.
I've also done it where before I bend it, for the purfling only, not for anything else, I'll soak it for a couple hours, and just 2 hours, not anymore. And then things get just flexible enough so nothing's snapping or breaking.
And the herringbone that I sell, I've done this already. Just take it, run it under hot water, tape it, and use the tape to press that down. Let it sit overnight, you can stick it in. So you don't have to fire up a bender to bend herringbone and I've done that for cutaways. Just take your time, you can feel when it's relieving, and away you go.
What glue are you using that allows you to soak it in the water for a couple of hours?
I'm not sure what Goring's using. I think they're probably using a waterproof type on or some other commercial.
Yeah, whatever it is, it never seems to separate on me, but I've noticed that if you leave it longer than that, it just really soaks in, and the wood itself does strange stuff.
Yes.
So it's not hard to bend the herringbone?
Oh, no, that's
Okay.
like bending spaghetti.
I remember reading things before where they had split it down the middle and,
They used to use wood.
yeah.
And when everything was wood, they had to do it that way. That was made in Germany up until just before World War II. Then we bombed the factories, and that was the end of that. They went without herringbone until 76, 78. And then they started, I think it was Goering started making it again. And I went through a whole process to document old stuff that I got mine made to pretty much 37 spec. And he's a repairman, he can tell you can look at old Martins, there's probably what, 5 or, every one was handmade. So you're gonna see variation. And Martin did, in fact, split them sometimes to do.
I have a huge stash of the wooden herringbone that was made in Germany.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can go through that entire stack 2 or 3 times before I find herringbone, a little section of herringbone that'll line up to what I'm trying to match on a guitar when I'm fixing the guitar. So it's one of those things where it's a little detail that takes forever.
So what is it made out of now?
Okay, it is either maple or pear wood, and the black is actually it's a wood fiber product, basically glorified paper, and it's very stable. And when you go to bend the herringbone, it keeps it from slipping and sliding so much. But if you look at herringbone when you first get it, it's nice and neat. But when you do bend it, it has to move. So that middle piece of fiber allows that movement and keeps it from breaking. That is why Martin used to split it. You can't bend that wood herringbone without it cracking. Okay?
I feared something that wasn't that way.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think you mentioned this, but I ran into this with the bindings that I had bent. So where the purflings were glued onto the bindings, I glued up a sandwich essentially with the bindings on top, the purflings on the bottom, and then sliced the bindings off. And when I bent it, I ran into the problems where at the waist, where there's the most severe bend, there was a little bit of a ripple in the purfling at the bottom. Binding on top of was just fine. And what I mentioned last time that to John Gurry, and he said what he does is you put the purflings together, you take the 2 pieces of binding together with the purflings facing the purfling really tightly, at the waist, and that helps to keep that rippling at bay, I guess.
Well, that's why I use the binding. I pitch it. So when you're bending it, it supports it.
Yeah. But that bringing them together is so the purfling has some support against each other. So you got the 2 binding strips with the purfling at the bottom. You butt the purfling up to each other and tape it up really tightly.
Because if you don't, it's just going to try to roll.
Yeah.
And it won't bend well.
Well, it doesn't roll. I mean, there's enough area there in the bindings. I haven't had any problem with that. But maybe it's the purfling itself that tries to
Well, it does,
separate
because
of the
you're
heat.
looking, you have something that's thin, you don't have wide.
Yeah.
So when this wants to go, it kind of wants to, think about it this way. You got this big piece of paper, you're trying to get it to bend, and it's not consistent, so it's going to do some funny things sometime. So pitch it, support it, and let's face it, if it does do a little bit, you're going to be sanding it anyway, so you'll be all right.
You're shrinking the length of the purfling when you're bending.
Yeah, yeah, you have these shear points of the wood, and they have to do this. Otherwise, they do that and crumble. So it's gonna do something, and sometimes it's just a piece of wood.
Yeah, and I was wondering, has anyone ever tried to just put a little kerf in the backside that's gonna get glued up against the guitar? I mean, just a very slight one to help.
I've never tried it, so you
alleviate that.
try it, let me know how it works.
Okay.
You know, this is where no true discovery was ever made through status quo thinking. So you got a problem, think of another way. I think that probably if you wouldn't cut it, it's just gonna be this. But try it, you might find that it works. I just found that by butting it with 2 pieces of binding or scrap and then just bending it, I've had a pretty good result. But it will do weird stuff if you bend a black white or black white black, and it's really nice to the form now. Once you take the binding off of it, it's going to do this real wacky bend. But when you put it back in, you're going to be able to get it to lay into the channel without it flopping all over. Because when you're doing a 45, you got the binding, black, white, black, poly, black, white, black, binding going the other way, you're fighting 7 pieces. And you're going to find as you start working, it just falls in like it's supposed to. Plastic, you don't have that problem.
What tape do you use when you tape up your bindings?
I use the 3M, it used to be number 233 tape, I'm not sure what it is now. We sell it at Blues Creek.
Is it green?
It's the green tape and it's a little stretchy tape.
Yeah. Auto parts.
The other thing you want to do if you're using wood binding, break the inside corner. Just take a little, like 220 grit, rub it against it, just break that corner. That way you get it to lay on your 2-axis. Anybody is there any machinist here besides me? Okay, he knows. We always break an inside corner when it's going into a bottom hole. Correct?
That's correct.
Because you'll never get it. The female is always a little proud, so the male has to get cut.
We know it's
What we don't do to keep our women happy. Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.